Raf Simons, Helmut Lang, and Maison Margiela all have their places in the timeline of fashion history. But as I've grown older, I have started to question what makes them some of the only designers considered archive. The term archive spans many designers from the late 90s and early 2000s, often being seen as sort of a turning point in their success as a designer. Some of their most celebrated campaigns. These are iconic shows that the pieces have just skyrocketed in value since their conception. Personally, this video will focus on the idea of archive in context of Japanese brands. That is what I'm most knowledgeable about and passionate about, but I think it can apply to any genre of fashion. I know there are Japanese designers such as Yohji Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo who are seen in that sort of avant-garde archive fashion space, but I really want to challenge the conception of what makes a designer archive. My aim is not to present this information in a sort of way that fetishizes the idea of Japanese craftsmanship. I think it is just another part of the puzzle to the larger fashion ecosystem, and it's just what interests me the most. As I learn more and more every day about how the Americana ideology developed in Japanese fashion, I struggle to understand why it holds less of a perceived monetary value than many archive fashion pieces. A great point of reference to examine under this subject is W. David Marx's book titled Amatora, which tracks the history of Japanese fashion following World War II. In his writing, Marx not only examines the sort of Americana aspect of Japanese fashion, but also the late 90s Uru Harajuku era featuring Hiroshi Fujiwara and Nigo. I think there are two very important ways to look at current archive fashion. The first important way to analyze that is from a cultural standpoint, and the second will be from a quality standpoint. From a cultural standpoint, I think the nowhere store tees are a perfect example of a garment that holds similar value to traditional archive products. The idea of streetwear itself came from the nowhere store opening, the limited batches of tees, and it also paved the way for some of the most celebrated Japanese designers in this day, whether it's Nigo or Jun Takahashi. While the shirt prices do vary, it still fails to reach that sort of monetary value of archive fashion. Yet these designers hold arguably just as important roles in the world of fashion. And moving beyond that, your artisanal factions of archive fashion, such as CCP or Guidi even, which are extremely interesting brands. I just think that there are other brands that sort of follow the same sort of ideals, yet go completely under the radar. One brand that I think executes this sort of quality and even combines it with cultural significance perfectly to end up as a sort of archive brand is Kapital. Their Boro technique is completely unrivaled in terms of other brands doing it. I know that Givenchy has tried to do it, and Louis Vuitton in Virgil's era even tried to do some sort of Boro work, but I think the only time a luxury house successfully did it was in Kim Jones's era at Louis Vuitton, when they actually brought in the Hirata family to do it for them, because it is such a complicated technique. And I say that it is complicated because the way that Kapital produces their Boro denim is taking new stuff and aging it so it looks as if they are vintage, worn out pieces of clothing all mended together. And this process is done entirely behind closed doors. There's a clear homage that Kapital creates to the path of Americana in Japanese fashion, but there's also such interesting explorations of different cultures, whether it's punk culture, sort of cowboy western culture. I think that the brand itself has so many significant contributions to pushing the techniques used in fashion, whether you look at like the keel vest that they make, some of the souvenir jackets that they make that fold into pillows. and yet somehow they definitely have collectors out there. But more than anything, I just don't understand how it still doesn't fall into the section of archive. The final brand I really believe in deserving this sort of archive title is Visvim. Their dedication to craftsmanship, I believe, is personally unlike anything else in the universe of fashion. It's such an anthropological pursuit of knowledge in which Hiroki's taking from cultures and just celebrating it in a way that consumers are left with the highest quality product they could possibly get, and the people that produce that are all recognized. Looking at Visvim, they use dyeing and construction techniques that are virtually extinct in the modern world, sometimes only having maybe one mill left in the entire world that still does that. I see Visvim as the perfect example of a designer doing something entirely against the grain and unorthodox, yet there's no sense of archive fashion with it. There's absolutely a cult following behind Visvim of collectors, yet you see some stuff simply is made by no other person in the world, go completely unrecognized. No one seems to be willing to necessarily take the time to understand why it's that much. They simply want to just point out that it's like ridiculously priced from a surface perspective, and that's fine. I recognize that not everyone is going to spend that much money on stuff, but the fact that Hiroki Nakamura is just in such his own space and fashion that rarely receives any outside attention or publicity, it's just another example of something somehow not being considered archive yet. You know, when they make a goat suede jacket and it ends up being this entirely unique product and this unique spin on Americana, people just see it as overpriced because they actually don't see the cost of making something like that and the talent that it requires. I see all of these brands both donned archive already and others whom I argue, you know, they should have that title, as concepts that all have unique roles in the fashion industry. Maybe more than anything, I see that there's sort of like this fixed definition of what can be archive and what can be a part of it, and I just am trying to start a conversation of maybe we should try as a community to grow past that and include more stuff. It's just so interesting how stagnant this term is, this idea of, you know, what is archive fashion. I really wanted to make a video to sort of open up the discussion that becomes increasingly more hazy with time. I think there's a certain nostalgia today that's reflected on those designers, and that almost gets denied to the people at the forefront of the industry in 2023. If you disagree with anything I said, please let me know in the comments. I'm so interested by this topic because archive fashion is something that is so controversial because of its sort of pricing and the snobbery that comes with it. And I just want to know what other people think. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this. I definitely don't know enough about archive fashion, but I just find the topic really interesting. If you liked this video or you're interested in some of the other ones I made, please make sure to like and subscribe. We just hit 100 subscribers, so thank you so much for that. And thank you always for watching my videos. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let me know what brand you think should be considered archive, and I'll see you in the next one.